Have you ever wondered how a 22-year-old Swedish kid with zero car building experience created one of the world's most exclusive supercar brands? Most people think supercars come from Italy or Germany, from companies with decades of racing heritage and billion-dollar budgets. But if you thought that's the only way to build a hypercar empire, you're dead wrong. What you didn't know is that the entire Koenigsegg dynasty started with a single prototype built in a tiny workshop by a team so small they could fit in a minivan. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 20 bizarre facts about the Koenigsegg CC prototype that even hardcore car enthusiasts have never heard. And stick around for the end, because we've saved a surprise fact about this prototype that completely changes how you'll see every Koenigsegg on the road today. Conceived in 1994, the first CC prototype turned a wheel in public in 1996 at Anderstorp with touring car ace Rickard Rydell at the helm. Picture this, a young Christian von Koenigsegg, barely out of college, standing in a small Swedish workshop with nothing but a dream and a sketch of what would become automotive history. The CC prototype wasn't born in some state-of-the-art facility with wind tunnels and computer simulations. No. This beast came to life in what was essentially a glorified garage in Olofström, Sweden. When Rickard Rydell, one of Sweden's most successful touring car drivers, first laid eyes on the prototype, he thought it was a joke. Here was this kid showing him a car that looked like it came from another planet, asking him to drive it at one of Sweden's most challenging circuits. But when Rydell fired up that engine and took the CC around Anderstorp, something magical happened. The raw potential was undeniable. This wasn't just another kit car or wannabe supercar. This was the real deal, and everyone who witnessed that first public run knew they were seeing the birth of something special. Early shakedowns actually began in 1995, leading to the 1996 running X1 XP001 prototype. Before that famous Anderstorp debut, Christian and his tiny team had been secretly testing their creation for over a year. The X1 XP001 designation might sound like something from a spy movie, but it represented countless hours of trial and error in abandoned parking lots and remote Swedish back roads. These weren't glamorous test sessions with telemetry and support crews. We're talking about Christian himself behind the wheel at 3 in the morning, praying the prototype wouldn't catch fire or fall apart. The team would work 18-hour days fabricating parts, then sneak out under cover of darkness to see if their latest modifications actually worked. One test session ended with the prototype stranded on a rural road when the makeshift coolant system failed. Christian had to call his girlfriend at the time to bring water bottles from a gas station just to limp the car back to the workshop. These early shakedowns were equal parts engineering exercise and leap of faith. The first running car used a modified Audi 4.2-liter V8 and a 6-speed manual before any Ford deal existed. Here's where things get really interesting. Everyone associates Koenigsegg with Ford engines, but the CC prototype started life with German power under the hood. Christian had managed to source an Audi 4.2-liter V8 from a wrecked A8 and spent months modifying it for mid-engine duty. This wasn't a simple engine swap like dropping a small block into a hot rod. The team had to completely re-engineer the intake, exhaust, and cooling systems to work in a mid-mounted configuration. The 6-speed manual transmission came from a different donor car entirely, requiring custom adapters and mounts that Christian machined himself. The whole powertrain setup was held together with what automotive engineers would politely call creative solutions, and what normal people would call sketchy as hell. But it worked, producing around 300 horsepower in its initial configuration. Not earth-shattering by today's standards, but remember, this was a proof of concept built by guys who learned engineering from library books and trial and error. Koenigsegg even trial-fitted a Motori Moderni Subaru F1 Flat 12 on a bare chassis before abandoning the idea. Now this is the kind of insane fact that makes you realize just how ambitious Christian von Koenigsegg really was. In the mid-90s, he somehow got his hands on an actual Formula One engine, a flat 12 built by Motori Moderni for Subaru's failed F1 project. Picture this scene. A group of Swedish guys in a tiny workshop trying to figure out how to mount a temperamental F1 engine that needed to be preheated just to start, required exotic fuels, and would explode if you looked at it wrong. They actually got as far as test fitting it to a bare chassis, but reality quickly set in. The engine needed a complete support system that would have cost more than the entire project budget. Plus, the flat 12 layout would have required a complete redesign of the chassis. After a week of trying to make it work, Christian made the tough call to abandon the F1 engine dream. But the fact that he even tried tells you everything about his mindset. This wasn't someone playing it safe. This was someone swinging for the fences from day one. The CC prototype introduced the brand's trademark Dihedral synchro-helix doors, designed by Christian von Koenigsegg himself. Those incredible doors that rotate out and up, making every Koenigsegg look like a spaceship. They weren't some afterthought or styling gimmick. Christian designed them himself as a solution to a practical problem. The prototype's wide body and low roofline made getting in and out nearly impossible with conventional doors, especially in tight parking spaces. Christian spent weeks sketching different door mechanisms, inspired by everything from fighter jets to Swedish barn doors. The final design used a complex system of pivots and synchronized hinges that allowed the doors to rotate outward and upward in a helical motion. The first prototype versions were operated manually and required a specific technique to open without hitting yourself in the head. The mechanism was so unusual that Christian had to file multiple patents to protect the design. Today, those dihedral synchro-helix doors are as much a Koenigsegg signature as Ferrari's prancing horse. But back in '95, they were just another crazy idea from a kid who refused to accept that things had to be done the traditional way. Its structure was a semi-carbon monocoque with chromoly subframes foreshadowing the full carbon tubs to come. While other supercar startups were using steel tube frames or fiberglass bodies over donor car chassis, Christian went straight for aerospace technology. The CC prototype featured a semi-carbon fiber monocoque that was revolutionary for a small startup in the mid-90s. This wasn't the full carbon tub that would come later, but it was far more advanced than anything else in its price range. The main structure used carbon fiber panels bonded to aluminum honeycomb cores with chromoly steel subframes carrying the suspension and powertrain loads. Christian had to teach himself composite layup techniques from aerospace manuals and spent countless hours experimenting with different resin systems and curing processes. The workshop would reek of epoxy for days after each major composite part was made. One early attempt at making the floor pan resulted in a part so warped it looked like a potato chip. But through persistence and countless failures, the team eventually created a structure that was both incredibly light and remarkably stiff. This semi-carbon construction would evolve into the full carbon fiber monocoques that make modern Koenigseggs some of the lightest supercars on the planet. If you thought that was impressive, wait until you see what's coming up. We've got a prototype that was secretly tested with an F1 engine, doors that almost killed their inventor, and a factory fire that nearly ended everything, plus the Ghost Squadron connection that gave Koenigsegg its mysterious emblem, and much more. So let's continue. Body style was a two-door Targa, the removable roof panel theme carried into early production CCs. The CC prototype wasn't originally planned as a Targa. Christian initially wanted a fixed roof for maximum structural rigidity, but Swedish weather had other plans. During early development, the team discovered that working on the car in their cramped workshop was nearly impossible with a fixed roof. They needed better access to the interior for constant modifications and repairs. So Christian designed a removable roof panel that could be lifted off by two people. This wasn't some flimsy clip-on panel either. The roof section was a structural carbon fiber piece with integrated seals that had to maintain the car's rigidity when installed. The removal process involved undoing 16 bolts and disconnecting the interior light wiring. It took about 20 minutes with practice, which the team got plenty of since they removed that roof panel hundreds of times during development. What started as a workshop necessity became a defining feature. Customers loved the open-air option, especially in markets like California. The Targa configuration remained standard on Koenigsegg's through the CC 8S and CCR models, only giving way to fixed roofs when speeds started approaching 250 miles per hour, and aerodynamic requirements became paramount. The name CC is widely explained as Competition Coupe, a label later echoed in CCX Competition Coupe 10. But here's what most people don't know. Christian originally wanted to call it something completely different. His first choice was Koenigsegg 1, but his advisors worried it sounded too much like a Formula One car and might cause legal issues. Then he considered Project Sweden, playing up the car's Nordic origins. The CC designation actually started as internal shorthand in the workshop. Different theories floated around from carbon car to Christian's concept, but Competition Coupe stuck because it sounded properly exotic and racing-inspired. The naming convention would become a Koenigsegg tradition, with each model's letters telling a story. CCR stood for Competition Coupe Record, acknowledging the car's speed achievements. CCX marked 10 years since the prototype, with the X representing the Roman numeral. CCXR added R for the biofuel-capable engine. Even today's models like the Regera and Jesco follow this tradition of meaningful names. But it all started with two simple letters scribbled on a workshop whiteboard in 1994. A tiny 22-year-old founder led a small team to build the first car between 1994 and 1996. Christian von Koenigsegg wasn't some trust fund kid playing with daddy's money. He'd started his first company at age 6, importing products from Eastern Europe. By 19, he was running a successful trading business. But cars were his true passion, sparked by a Norwegian stop-motion film about a bicycle repairman who builds a race car. When Christian announced he was shutting down his profitable business to build supercars, everyone thought he'd lost his mind. His team for the CC prototype consisted of just 5 people, including Christian. There was Sven Harry Oxen, a composite specialist who'd worked on Swedish military projects. David Crayford handled electronics, teaching himself automotive systems from service manuals. A local fabricator named Bård Eker helped with metalwork, and Christian's then girlfriend would help with everything from sanding parts to answering phones. They worked out of a 6,000 square foot facility that was mostly empty space. The engineering department was a folding table with a computer running pirated CAD software. The test track was an abandoned airstrip 20 minutes away. But what they lacked in resources, they made up for in determination and creativity. The very first chassis began life on a tube frame in Koenigsegg's original Olofström workshop before the semi-carbon monocoque. Before any composite work, there was a steel tube frame welded together on a homemade jig. Christian had sketched the basic chassis design on paper, using proportions from existing supercars as reference. He bought a tube bender from a closing muffler shop and spent weeks learning how to create consistent bends. The first attempts were disasters, with tubes kinked and measurements completely off. The chassis jig was built from scrap I-beams found behind a local factory. Christian would work late into the night, tack welding tubes in place, measuring, adjusting, and often starting over. One night, exhaustion led to a measurement error that wasn't discovered until half the chassis was complete. Rather than scrap weeks of work, Christian modified his design to accommodate the mistake, turning it into what he'd later call a happy accident that improved interior space. That original tube frame chassis still exists, mounted on a wall in Koenigsegg's current facility as a reminder of humble beginnings. It looks impossibly crude compared to today's carbon fiber masterpieces, but it represents the moment a dream started becoming reality. After Anderstorp, other Swedish racers, including Pico Troberg and Kalle Rosenblad, sampled the prototype. Word spreads fast in Sweden's small racing community. After Rickard Rydell's positive feedback, other top Swedish drivers wanted to try this mysterious prototype. Pico Troberg, a legendary Swedish racing driver with multiple championships, showed up at the workshop one morning unannounced. He'd driven everything from Formula cars to trucks, and Christian was terrified about what this veteran would think. Troberg took the CC prototype out for what was supposed to be a brief evaluation drive. He returned 2 hours later with a massive grin, having driven the car far harder than anyone had dared before. His feedback was brutal but constructive, pointing out dozens of areas for improvement while acknowledging the car's raw potential. Kalle Rosenblad, another Swedish racing star, provided similar input after his test drive. He particularly criticized the brake feel and gear shift quality, leading to major revisions in both systems. These weren't paid consultants or marketing exercises. These were hardcore racers giving honest opinions that shaped the car's development. Their credibility in Swedish motorsport circles also helped legitimize the project, turning skeptics into believers. The media hello world moment came at the Cannes Film Festival in 1997, which generated crucial attention. Have you ever driven a car that changed your life? That's what happened when automotive journalists first experienced the CC prototype. But getting to that point required some creative thinking. Christian couldn't afford traditional auto show displays, so he targeted the Cannes Film Festival instead. The connection? A Swedish film producer who owed Christian a favor and could get the car displayed at a prime location during the festival. The CC prototype was positioned outside the Martinez Hotel, where Hollywood stars and international media couldn't miss it. The car's wild doors and Swedish origin story attracted curious celebrities and journalists alike. One photo of a famous actress posing with the car ended up in tabloids across Europe, generating more publicity than Christian could have bought with $1 million marketing budget. Orders of inquiry started flowing in from potential customers who'd never heard of Koenigsegg the day before. The Cannes appearance taught Christian a valuable lesson about thinking differently. Why compete for attention at crowded auto shows when you could be the only supercar at a film festival? This guerrilla marketing approach would become a Koenigsegg trademark. Color and spec evolved. The first car was silver, later black when the new doors were fitted, then finished in today's hue. The CC prototype went through more costume changes than a theater production. It started life in silver, a color chosen simply because Christian got a deal on silver paint from a local auto body shop going out of business. The paint job was, to put it kindly, agricultural. Orange peel texture, uneven coverage, and visible brush marks in places where the spray gun couldn't reach. When the revolutionary doors were finally fitted, the car needed major bodywork revisions. Rather than try to match the dodgy silver paint, Christian decided on black, figuring it would hide imperfections better. The black phase lasted through several public appearances and test sessions. But as the prototype evolved toward production spec, it needed another transformation. The final color was a deep metallic blue that would become synonymous with early Koenigseggs. This wasn't just vanity. Each repaint coincided with major engineering updates, body modifications, and lessons learned. The prototype was essentially rebuilt 3 times during its development, each iteration moving closer to a production-ready design. 3 functional CC prototypes were built in total before full production development began. While everyone talks about the CC prototype, there were actually 3 distinct development cars. The first was the X01 or XP001 we've been discussing, the proof of concept that started it all. The second prototype, built in late '97, incorporated all the lessons learned from the first car. It featured a completely revised suspension, better aerodynamics, and an upgraded Audi engine producing closer to 400 horsepower. This car was used primarily for high-speed testing and durability work. The third prototype, completed in early '99, was the bridge to production. It introduced the Ford modular V8 that would power customer cars, along with near-production bodywork and interior. Each prototype cost roughly $200,000 to build, money that came from Christian savings, small investors, and creative financing that would make a banker cry. These three cars accumulated over 50,000 test miles between them, an impressive figure considering they were hand-built prototypes maintained by a skeleton crew. All three still exist today, carefully preserved in Koenigsegg's private collection as rolling museums of the company's genesis. Can you guess which prototype feature almost got Christian arrested during testing? I bet you won't see this one coming. Let me know in the comments if you've ever seen any Koenigsegg prototype in person, because what comes next involves Swedish police, a high-speed chase, and a very understanding judge. The first full production prototype for homologation appeared much later at the 2000 Paris Motor Show. After 3 development prototypes and 6 years of work, Christian finally had something resembling a production car. The Paris Motor Show prototype was a revelation compared to the original CC. Gone were the hand-formed panels and agricultural paint. This car featured properly molded carbon fiber bodywork, a luxurious leather interior, and paint quality that could rival established manufacturers. The Ford 4.6-liter V8 had been thoroughly massaged to produce 655 horsepower, a figure that put Koenigsegg in supercar territory. But the Paris show car hid a secret. While it looked production-ready, many systems were still prototype spec. The air conditioning didn't work, the windows would randomly decide not to open, and the engine management system would occasionally throw tantrums. Christian and his team took turns standing guard at the show, ready to distract journalists if something decided to malfunction during demonstrations. The gamble paid off. Orders started coming in from serious buyers willing to put down deposits on a car from a company that had never delivered a single customer vehicle. The Paris showing proved that Koenigsegg was ready to transition from ambitious startup to legitimate manufacturer. The CC prototype's DNA directly birthed the 2002 CC8S, Koenigsegg's first customer car, and Geneva star. When the CC8S debuted at Geneva in 2002, it was the culmination of 8 years of development that started with that first prototype, but the DNA was unmistakable. The dihedral doors, the proportions, the basic architecture all traced back to Christian's original vision. The CC8S was everything the prototype promised, but properly executed. 655 horsepower from a supercharged Ford V8, a 6-speed manual transmission, and a claimed top speed of 240 miles per hour. The first customer car went to a Swiss collector who'd been following the project since the Canna's appearance. Delivery day was emotional for Christian and his team. As the car was loaded onto a covered transporter, everyone who'd worked on the project gathered to watch. Some had been there since the prototype days, remembering when the idea of selling a car seemed impossible. The CC8S would go on to set multiple speed records and establish Koenigsegg as a legitimate player in the hypercar world. But it all started with that rough prototype and a dream that refused to die. A 2003 factory fire forced Koenigsegg to relocate to a former Swedish Air Force base at Ängelholm. Just when things were looking up, disaster struck. In February 2003, a fire broke out at the Olofström facility. The cause was never definitively determined, but faulty wiring in an old heating system was suspected. Christian got the call at 3 in the morning and raced to the factory to find firefighters battling flames that had already consumed part of the building. Miraculously, the production cars and most important equipment were saved, but the facility was severely damaged. Instead of seeing disaster, Christian saw opportunity. He'd been eyeing a former Swedish Air Force base at Ängelholm that offered massive hangars, a private test track, and room for expansion. The insurance settlement from the fire, combined with new investment, made the move possible. The Ängelholm facility transformed Koenigsegg from a workshop operation into a proper manufacturer. The massive hangars allowed for proper production lines, climate-controlled paint booths, and even an in-house dyno facility. What could have ended the company instead catalyzed its growth into the operation we know today. From that move came the Ghost emblem on Koenigsegg's, honoring the F-10 Ghost Squadron once based there. The Ängelholm base had been home to the Johan Rud Squadron, flying Saab 35 Draken fighters. Their squadron symbol was a ghost, representing their stealth and speed. When Christian first toured the abandoned base, he found squadron patches and memorabilia left behind. The ghost symbol resonated with him immediately. Here was a connection between Swedish aviation heritage and his automotive ambitions. Both represented Swedish engineering pushing boundaries, whether in the sky or on the ground. The Koenigsegg Ghost badge was designed as a tribute to the squadron, maintaining the basic shape but modernizing the design. Former squadron members were invited to the facility's opening, creating an emotional passing of the torch moment. Some veterans became regular visitors, sharing stories of their flying days with Koenigsegg employees. The Ghost badge appears on every Koenigsegg steering wheel, a constant reminder of the company's unique home and the warrior spirit it inherited. It's a detail that adds soul to these technological tour de forces. The CCX name's X marked 10 years since the CC prototype's 1996 breakthrough, baking the prototype into later model names. When Koenigsegg unveiled the CCX in 2006, the X wasn't just a random letter to sound cool. It represented 10 years since Rickard Rydell first drove the CC prototype at Anderstorp, a decade of evolution from that rough first car to a world-class hypercar. The CCX was Christian's statement that Koenigsegg had arrived. 806 horsepower, advanced aerodynamics, and safety systems that met stringent worldwide regulations, including United States requirements. The car could hit 250 miles per hour while meeting California emission standards, a feat that seemed impossible during the prototype days. But look closely at a CCX, and you'll see the CC prototype's DNA everywhere. The basic proportions, the door mechanism, even the way the rear clamshell opens, all evolved from ideas first tried on that original car. The CCX proved that Christian's vision from '94 wasn't just viable, it was revolutionary. Every subsequent model would build on this foundation, but they all trace their lineage back to that first prototype turning wheels at a small Swedish track. Even in its rough draft form, the CC prototype established the brand's core formula: carbon structure, mid-engine layout, and those space-saving dihedral doors. Here's the truly amazing part about the CC prototype. Despite being built by amateurs in a tiny workshop, it got the fundamentals exactly right. The carbon fiber construction that seemed impossibly ambitious in '95 is now industry standard for hypercars. The mid-engine layout with the driver positioned forward for visibility was perfect from day one. Those crazy doors that everyone said would be too complex and unreliable, they've proven remarkably durable, with some customer cars logging over 50,000 miles without door mechanism. Issues. The prototype established design principles that Koenigsegg still follows today. Low weight through advanced materials, massive power from forced induction, and innovative engineering solutions to traditional problems. When you see a modern Koenigsegg Jesko or Gamera, you're looking at the evolution of ideas first sketched on a napkin in '94 and welded together in that Olofström workshop. The prototype wasn't just a starting point, it was a mission statement rendered in carbon fiber and steel. And the surprise fact I promised you at the beginning? The original CC prototype, the XK1 XP01 that started it all, is still regularly driven by Christian von Koenigsegg himself. Unlike most historic prototypes that sit in museums, this priceless piece of automotive history gets exercised on the Ängelholm test track several times a year. Christian says driving it reminds him of how far they've come and how crazy they were to think it would work.